Hey legends, welcome along to Sceammeupbotty. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart. We're going to get into talking a little bit about the motion picture, Star Trek the motion picture. Now, if you're new to Star Trek, haven't seen the shows or any of it, and you're a movie fan and you want to start off there, this, in all honesty, even as a huge Star Trek fan, the motion picture can be hard work to get through, especially today in the world of Avengers and all those sorts of big blockbuster action movies. It is very, very slow by today's standards. And even back when it first came out, there was a bit of a backlash on it because of the over-reliance and special effects and whatnot. And that's another thing, that the motion suffers a lot from Enterprise glory shots, and it spends so much time showing you the new Enterprise, the refitted Enterprise. And if you're a fan of the show, you'll understand why they do what they do when Captain Kirk and Scotty are in the shuttlecraft flying up to dry dock where Enterprise is going through its refit. Literally where they dock at on the ship, they could have flown right up to it and docked, but they fly up nice and slow and actually pass by Enterprise way out in front of it and turn and come back so Kirk can get a good look at the front of the ship head on. And there's a massive love affair between Captain Kirk, and the motion picture Admiral Kirk. There's a huge love story between him and the Enterprise that ran throughout the series. And yes, we'll delve into that in more detail when we get into the series. But this came out in 1979. A lot of awesome things happened in 1979. Star Trek the motion picture was released, and I was born. Okay, that's blowing a lot of sunshine up my own ass there. Yep, 79. It was directed by Robert Wise. Of course, it was based on the show. Gene Roddenberry was on there as producer. Screenplay by Harold Livingston. Story by Alan Dean Foster. And of course it stars all of the original cast of the original series. Distributed by Paramount Pictures. And it was surprisingly only 132 minutes long, with all the massive glory shots of the Enterprise. And when they eventually reach V'ger and get inside it, and the Enterprise journeys towards the centre of this huge cloud that V'ger's in, it seems to take forever. It really does. It kind of suffers from lack of pace in places. But in saying all that, I am a huge fan of the motion picture. I absolutely love it. And for me, it's a joy to watch every time I see it. It's been years since I actually watched the movie properly, but I actually, sat down last night, gave it a go again, and I enjoyed it just as much last night as I did the very first time I seen it. It is a nice escape from reality, and that's what I think new Star Trek is kind of sorely lacking, is that escape from reality. Like, there's just, Star Trek always had a way of bringing in things from the real world and talking about serious real issues, but it was always very smart in the way that done it, and you were getting a moral lesson without actually realising at times you were getting a moral lesson. And in new Star Trek, particularly I found in season 3 of Discovery, you were kind of getting things pretty much rammed down your throat, instead of them doing it in that smart original way that the original series done. Not just the original series. Next Generation, DS9, Voyager and Enterprise were very, very good at doing that as well. But yes, let me see. Gene Roddenberry served as producer on this, and the film was, gosh, where did I leave that note at? I'm trying to see how much the film actually cost. It was a pretty big budget for its day, and it overshot its budget in a big bad way before production was finished. And I think when Star Trek 2 came around, there was a bit of trouble of actually getting it off the ground because of the way that it ran over in the first place here. Its final production ballooned to 44 million, and it earned 139 million. Now, that's a good payback for it, but it wasn't what Paramount was looking for. I can't find the original. Yes, $15 million budget for Star Trek the Motion Picture, which was pretty big back in 77. It's nothing these days, but that's inflation for you. So for a budget of 15 million, and it ended up costing 44 million to get made, of course the studio was going to be a bit worried about what's going to happen here. So yes, basically in this movie, at the beginning of it, we come across 3 Klingon battleships, and you see the redesigned Klingons 100% changed from the original series. Now, I was only, when this movie came out, I was literally 10 months old when it came out, so I have no memory of that. But I don't recall ever reading or hearing somewhere that there was some massive, huge backlash from the fans about the redesigned Klingons. You know, they look completely different than what they looked like in the original series. And it is a huge, huge departure from the original Klingons from the 60s. So, to go back to Discovery again, you know, people freaked the heck out when it was released and they seen the Klingons, like, oh, they look nothing like Klingons, this show's a disaster because of it. But it's happened before, and I'm pretty sure something like that will happen again as Star Trek progresses forward. You know, people bring their own creativity to a project, and as I said in the last video, there's my YouTube side coming out again. The last podcast I was talking about Star Trek, the studio, to get it made, had to make allowances, a certain percentage of changes to get it going, and you know, the changes they made in favour of the things they wanted to stay the same, I'm happy enough with that. You know, that percentage, not a problem. Anyway, plot of the movie, 23rd century, Starfleet modern station Epsilon 9 detects an alien entity hidden in a massive cloud of energy moving through space towards Earth. The cloud easily destroys 3 Klingon warships and disintegrates Epsilon 9 when it tries to investigate. Again, that opening shot of the 3 Klingon ships is very impressive too, and you know, they used miniatures for the ships back then, and it gave it that little bit of extra realism to it that I think even now, as far as CGI has progressed, I think we still have that little uncanny valley thing going on there. But these old visual effects were fantastic. But you know, the green screen that they used is very, very apparent in this movie. You can see that, like, the black outline around the ships, especially the Klingon ships at the start of it. It's very, very apparent. But impressive looking. Nonetheless, this is the first time. You need to realise that if you go onto Netflix these days and look up the original series and you sit down to watch it, you're seeing a version of the show that has all its visual effects upgraded from the original Star Trek. Now, I do believe, and I could be wrong about this, but if you go back and you watch the original pilot with Captain Pike in it, and I believe, if memory serves, I don't think that was aired until up around the 90s. So it was sitting on the shelf the whole time. Like Star Trek original series ran right the way through before anybody actually seen this. Bar, they used the footage from the cage in an early episode of Star Trek. But I'm digressing again. But I think if you go back, check out that episode, The Cage, I think you'll get the original visual effects of the Enterprise at the beginning of the show. And it's, by today's standards, it doesn't look good. The upgraded effects you'll get on Netflix for the whole series, again, is enhanced, redone, not what it looked like originally. Because I can remember seeing reruns of the show as a kid before all that stuff was done, and it didn't look anywhere near as good as it does right now. But anyway, back on Earth, the Enterprise, it's going through a major refit and completely redesigned, pretty much rebuilt from the ground up. So the Enterprise from the 60s series is completely different from this one. But again, it's pretty much at the core the exact same ship from the original series, just with a very, very big facelift on it. Captain Kirk is no longer captain in this movie. He is Admiral, and he's working in San Francisco as Chief of Starfleet Operations. When he finds out that the Enterprise has been assigned to intercept the cloud, he takes his chance to take over Enterprise. Again, huge love affair of the ship. And there's a lot of clashes between him and a few of the crew members. Of course, Captain Decker, who's now in command of the Enterprise, isn't happy when Kirk tells him that he's going to, take command of Enterprise because of his experience in Deep Space 5-year mission and everything, referring back to the original series. So they're going to be at loggerheads throughout the movie. And surprisingly, when Dr. McCoy turns up on the ship, even him and Kirk have a bit of a moment within the movie where, he pretty much grounds Kirk throughout the movie. Kirk is, I wouldn't say he's, been shown as like a villain character in this movie, but he definitely, there's a side to him that is not going to help in the mission with his attitude towards Decker and the rest of the crew at times. He wants to get the mission completed, but he's very arrogant in how he's doing the thing, and him and McCoy have a moment in the movie where when they're on the mission, leaving Earth, they head towards this giant energy cloud. Kirk ends up getting the ship in a heck of a lot of trouble, trying to get it to go to warp drive before it's ready to go. Like they haven't even, the refit isn't completed. They haven't had time to do a shakedown of the systems or test the ship in any way, so it's heading out cold. And even though Kirk has a heck of a lot of command even though Kirk has a hell of a lot of command experience and probably the best man to be in the captain's chair for the mission, he has absolutely no clue about the redesigned systems, the new systems, the way the Enterprise works. He's completely loves the ship to pieces, but as far as the workings of it go, he is quite clueless in this. While trying to get the warp, they end up getting into a wormhole, which is pretty weird. Inside it, they're trapped at like a warp level, and they can't get the ship to come out of warp speed, and they come across this huge asteroid within this wormhole. And it's kind of weird because I'm thinking to myself, you know, it's really weird whenever you get into amateur filmmaking like I'm doing. You kind of start reading more into movies and stuff than you really should. You should just sit down and enjoy the movie. For the most part, me knowing how a lot of stuff works in films hasn't ruined it for me, but this wormhole sequence in the motion picture and this giant asteroid that they come across of it, I'm thinking to myself, how the heck did this asteroid achieve warp speed? But anyway, it's just tasty visuals for its day. I think they were just, we've got a huge budget here, we can do visual effects on Star Trek that we never could do before, so we're going to rip the ass out of it completely. Kirk calls the order to fire phasers on the asteroid, and Decker jumps over his head, countermands the order, and instead gets Chekhov to fire photon torpedoes at it, which destroys the wormhole, gets the Enterprise out of warp speed and back to safety. Kirk isn't at all happy because he's just been made to look like an idiot in front of the whole bridge crew, and of course pulls Decker to his quarters along with McCoy. McCoy decides to go on his own. Kirk didn't ask him to come, but this is where McCoy jumps in to ground him in the movie, and Kirk's angry at Decker, stop trying to compete with me, sort of a thing. But Decker explains that the way the ship's systems are set up, if they had fired phasers when Kirk asked for it, there would have been an energy blowback which could have destroyed Enterprise. So of course Kirk in that moment realises that he's 100% in the wrong, and he's like, you acted properly. And Decker goes back to his duties, and this is when him and McCoy have the moment where McCoy tells him, you know what, it's not Decker that's competing, it's you that's competing and whatnot. So there is that side to Kirk that we get that much, but I would like to have seen that been delved into a little bit deeper. That's kind of as far as it went in the movie. Throughout the rest of it, him and Decker do have their moments of disagreements, but they come together by the end of it, and they're on the same page by the time they reach V'ger. The only person that didn't show up on the ship at the beginning was Spock, but he's off in Vulcan. He's left Starfleet, and he's going through the discipline of Kolinar, which is the Vulcan way of purging all emotions from their minds. And Spock is half human, so it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to do this as well. But at the beginning of the film, to jump back a little bit, Spock can't complete Kolinar because his mind is not settled, because he's receiving like impressions from deep space, which turns out to be V'ger. So the big Vulcan mistress woman thing, whatever you call her, she's going to give him this necklace thing that says that he's completed his Kolinar, but whenever he stops her from putting it on him, she doesn't mind, meld with him, realises he's not going to complete Kolinar, what he's seeking, he can't find it in Vulcan, so he leaves to head back to Enterprise. And works out great, because they're Enterprise's new science officer, which was also a Vulcan, died in a transporter accident before Enterprise left space dock to go on the mission. Which is something in this film that has, even after all these years, I'm 42 now, and if there's a memorable moment from Star Trek history, it is that transporter accident close to the start of the film, just before Enterprise leaves space dock. And you know, it's not graphic in any way, shape, or form. It's just you can see the beam within the transporter. The alarms go off, and Kirk's jumps behind the controls of the transporter, and he's in communication with Earth. And they're trying to get Earth to retrieve the patterns from the transporter before the people within it get killed. But they're too far through the system, and they start to appear on the Enterprise. But their patterns aren't forming properly. And unfortunately for the two people within that, the new science officer being one of them, they start to reform out of phase. And you don't actually get to properly see them. You get to see an outline of someone, and then you hear this god awful scream that seems to just come from, I don't know, it's got this weird echo to it, and it's just like completely, not in our reality sort of a thing. It's just like a way off in the distance sort of thing, and it's the transporter fades out, and they get the news from Starfleet that what they got back didn't live long, thankfully. So that there has stuck with me all these years. I think when it comes to freaking people out with movies and whatnot, I think that the stuff that you don't actually get to see 100% is a lot scarier than the stuff you actually do get to see. But I could digress on that for ages. I'm not going to do that. We're going to stick with the film here. Spock meets up with Enterprise during their journey towards this massive cloud, and yes, they find out that Spock is there, and he's kind of got his own agenda for this energy cloud, and he thinks that it holds the answers that he's looking for. And McCoy and Kirk both have the impression that, if things go belly up on the mission, would Spock put his own interests ahead of Enterprise and the crew. But Kirk kind of just believes that Spock wouldn't do that sort of thing. But there is a section within the movie where Spock leaves the ship and gets into a spacesuit with a rocket pack and shoots himself off into the centre of the cloud without Kirk's permission. But turns out it was a good thing in the long run. Ties up a lot of loose ends that are happening within the film. But yes, by the time we reach a conclusion in the film, everybody's on the same page and whatnot. There is an officer on the ship called, oh gosh, what's her name? I watched the thing last night. Oh, please forgive me. I've got it right here somewhere. She's a love interest of Captain Decker. Aaliyah. She's she's a navigation officer on the Enterprise, and he's had a history with her, and there's feelings between the two of them. When Enterprise gets inside the energy cloud, we discover a huge metallic ship in there. This is another part where the movie goes on for ages, flying over the top of this thing to get to the centre of it. And there's a probe, turns up like an energy beam on the bridge of the Enterprise, and it's going around and it's scanning through the computers downloading information, and Decker tries to get in front of it at one point to shut down the main computer of Enterprise, and fails. And Spock tries, he succeeds, smashes the computer, and the energy probe turns its power on both Decker and particularly Spock, blasts them across the bridge, and then throws its full power at Leia, and then she just vanishes off the bridge to reappear later on in the film as a human probe. She's like pretty much a droid, a human looking droid that V'ger has sent to the Enterprise to connect with the biological life forms that are infesting Enterprise. We can't figure out at this point why any of this is happening. Nothing's making sense. Like, there's a few loose ends been tied up at this point, but we haven't got the whole story at this point. So eventually, her and Decker go off, and you start to see bits of humanity within her, even though she's a fully robotic form at this point. There is her emotional self has been recreated, and that's kind of below the surface. So Decker is trying to access that to get the information that they need. Eventually, she starts demanding that Kirk give the information that V'ger needs. It has came to Earth to reconnect with the Creator. Nobody understands what this is. You know, who's the Creator, and what are we going to do here, sort of thing. But Spock realizes that this V'ger thing is a child, and you need to treat it like a child. And it's a particularly brilliant part in the movie, which I really like, is when Kirk gets the upper hand on V'ger and this probe of Leia. She's demanding this, demanding that. Enterprise is trapped inside this V'ger ship, and there's pretty much nothing they can do. Give me the information. And Kirk is like, no, I will not give you the information. And he commands the bridge crew to close up Enterprise, get off the bridge. And that's great whenever the Leia probe kind of starts sounding desperate, as if I need help. Kirk, help me, please, sort of thing. You know, give me the information that I need. But at the same time, she kind of calls his bluff in this moment, and Kirk says, you know, I'll only give the information. Humans are we are the Creator. She doesn't believe it at this point, and like we'll only give the information to V'ger ourselves, not as probe. So there's a beautiful part of them. I love the whole ending sequence of this movie where they find out exactly what V'ger is, and Enterprise comes up to this. If you've been to Northern Ireland and seen the Giant's Causeway, there's these massive stones that are, you know, shaped almost exactly like the outline where V'ger's at in the middle of this thing, and Enterprise comes nose to nose with it. There's an oxygen air bubble outside Enterprise, and we actually get to see Kirk, McCoy, Spock, Decker, and Leia coming up out of a little hole on the dish of Enterprise and walking off the edge of it. Visually stunning for the year it came out. Absolutely fantastic. When they do get down into the centre of this thing, this huge giant ship, V'ger is revealed to be Voyager 6, a 20th century Earth space probe believed to be lost in a black hole. 20th century, this is set in the 23rd century, so there's a 300-year difference in there. And the damaged probe, turns out the Voyager 6 probe was found by an alien race of living machines that interpreted it as programming as instructions to learn all that can be learned and to return that information to the creator. The machines basically upgraded the probe to fulfill its mission, built this giant ship to send it home in, and on its journey back, which has taken 300 years, the probe gathered so much knowledge that it achieved sentience. It's a living machine itself now. Spock realised that Voyager lacks the ability to give itself a purpose other than the original mission. Having learned what it could on its journey home, it finds its existence meaningless. Before transmitting all its information, Voyager insists that the creator come in person to finish the sequence. They try to transmit the signal, which would be the old NASA signal that was there to unlock the information if Voyager 6 originally made it back. But when they do transmit it from Enterprise towards Voyager, Voyager doesn't get the information. At this point, Earth and everything is in big trouble, because if they don't succeed in their mission, Voyager, they assume, will just digest the planet Earth the way that it did with the Epsilon 9 station at the beginning, along with the free Klingon warships. But Spock realises that Voyager has burned out its own circuits just now. They discover the circuits burned out, but Spock is like, this literally just happened. Voyager did it itself, so that the information couldn't be accepted in that way. So when Voyager insists the creator come in person to finish the sequence, Decker, having feelings for Aliyah, decides he wants to be the one to, physically key in this sequence to the Voyager probe. He gives himself to Voyager, merges with Aliyah and Voyager, creating a new life form that disappears into space. Another beautiful visual effect sequence at the end of the movie where this happens. It is a great little movie. Definitely, it feels like Star Trek, 100%. I'm not 100% sold on the costume designs in this movie. I'm a huge fan of the Starfleet uniforms and Wrath of Khan onwards, but the Starfleet uniforms in this one here just feels very out of place for Star Trek. As far as the redesigned Enterprise goes, absolutely love it. It looks fantastic. I think out of all Enterprises up to this point, I think this is my favourite design, and I can't see anything topping that. And saying that, the Enterprise we got in season 2 of Discovery is a beautiful, beautiful mixture between this Enterprise and the original 60s Enterprise. But for me, and I do have a model of the motion picture Enterprise sitting across the office here from me now, absolutely love it. The characters in the movie feel very much like the characters we know from the original 60s series, even though there's a bit of a disconnect between all of them at the beginning of the movie. And there's that moment of McCoy tackling Kirk and putting him in his place, sort of thing. But that's not really out of place either from the original series, because McCoy was always that character. He was always the guy that would rein Kirk in if he needed it. And by the end of the movie, even with this disconnect between the characters, the not sure if we can trust Spock or any of that. You know, it all comes together by the end of the movie. And within the last 25 minutes to a half hour in the movie, we finally see the Enterprise crew back to the formula that we loved from the 60s. So, I'll probably do a similar podcast with the rest of the movies, and then I'll maybe do, my favourite movie, list of my favourite movies in order. It'll be a tough one to do, that's especially with the motion picture. It's a very hit and miss film, depending on where you're at when you watch it. Like, I think if you come out of more modern movies and come back to watch this, you're going to find it hard work to keep up with it. It just seems to take forever to get going. And by the time that it really does get going, it kind of stops again because of just the pacing of it. I feel the pacing of it could have been a bit quicker in places. But, surprisingly, I'm, as a huge fan, saying it myself, the running time for it is 132 minutes. It kind of does feel a lot longer because of all the incredibly drawn out visual effects shots within it. It's just, I feel that it suffers. I'm pretty sure other people have had the same criticisms of it. I feel that it suffers from we have a huge budget for a change. Look what we can do, sort of thing. I think a lot of the stuff that they did could have been toned down slightly and would have sped up the process. I'm pretty sure you could have pulled out about 15 minutes of this film and still gotten the same amount of story on there and just tightened up the effect shots a little bit. Like the run around of Enterprise at the start, fully understand why they're on it. Kirk's love affair with the ship, hasn't seen it in a while. Looks different, the refit is completely different. Let's have a little, it's like a man with his first car sort of thing. A man hasn't got a love affair like the love affair he has with his first car. It's that sort of deal. Even leaving dry dock takes a while for that to happen. Looks amazing, but could have been done quicker. And that part where Enterprise is within the cloud, comes across the giant V'ger ship and flies over the top of it to get to the centre. Seems to take forever as well. Like, it could have been trimmed, that part in particular could have been trimmed down a hell of a lot, but visually looks amazing for 77. For a series that for a movie that nearly didn't get made, I really enjoyed it. And in all fairness, if it wasn't for the success of Star Wars, people get into the arguments all the time. Happens with me on a regular basis. If you've seen any of my videos, you wouldn't think I was a huge Star Trek fan, because in the background I've got two cardboard promotional cutouts of Star Wars, the special edition. I was working in a shop when that came out, Superstore, and when they brought out the special editions, I had just left school. It was my first, well, it wasn't even my first job. It was like I was training in retail, work placement sort of thing. I was in this shop. We had these hanging all over the place, and when that promotion was over, they were just going to scrap them. I picked them up, and they're up on the wall now in my office. There's those two. There's a couple of little cutouts of C-3PO and Darth Vader on the desk right in front of me right now. I've got the 3 posters from the original trilogy. A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So if you've seen any of my videos, you'll think, oh, Star Wars freak. But in all fairness, I think I'm a bigger Star Trek freak than a Star Wars freak at this point. And in all fairness, and it's been said quite a few times over the years, if Star Wars hadn't have hit big when it did, Star Trek the motion picture might never have happened, because the owners of the show weren't content in how it was performing throughout its 3-season run. And even with the animated series that came out a little bit after the original series finished, they still weren't really happy with the way that it ran. It didn't seem to be. It never. For the owners of the show, I believe they never really thought that the show brought on the viewers that they would have hoped that it did. And that's why they cancelled it after the 3 seasons, and we got the animated series as well. But yes, if Star Wars hadn't hit, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind is listed as another one that helped pave the way to getting the motion picture made. Now, in all fairness, there was another Star Trek project in between the original series, the animated series, and the motion picture happening, which was going to be called Star Trek Phase 2. And they were trying to get that into some sort of production to see what they could do with it. But when Close Encounters hit big, along with the first Star Wars movie, they decided to scrap Star Trek Phase 2 and go to a motion picture. So the story we got in the motion picture is supposed to be pretty much like an extended version of the pilot episode that we would have got for Star Trek Phase 2 if it had happened. That's the rumours anyway. I can't say with any degree of accuracy if that is true or not, but we got what we got with the motion picture. And in all fairness, I'm just going by memory here, the huge budget that swelled from 15 million up to 45 and only made 139 million back. I think that almost, as far as the studios were concerned, they didn't see that as a huge one, and they decided that when the next Star Trek came out in 1982, it got a much, much lower budget than the original Star Trek had. Now, I don't have those figures right now, but I do know, because of the performance of the motion picture, that really was the decision for the second Star Trek. And to kind of jump ahead to that, they had that little faith in the follow-up to Star Trek the motion picture, that when they eventually settled on the name Star Trek the Wrath of Khan, which changed tons of times throughout production, they originally didn't have Star Trek 2 in the title. It was just called Star Trek the Wrath of Khan, because they even the owners of the franchise didn't want the Wrath of Khan to be too connected to the motion picture because of the performance of it. So a lot of people didn't have any faith in this movie. It was pretty much the same for Star Trek from the very beginning. It wasn't until the show went into syndication, till it got its fan base started to grow, it got cult status through syndication. So it's weird to think about that there. You've got a 3-season run, an animated series, so you may as well say 4 seasons worth of the original show, that throughout the production and the original airing of it, people were kind of like, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. So for Star Trek to have got to the size that it is now is actually very, very flippin' impressive. Because, these days, if a film performed like the motion picture, I think that would be the end of it. But of course, Star Trek grew. We got a shitload of movies, a fuck ton of shows that I enjoy the crap out of, sometimes on a daily basis. Like right now, I sat down last night, fell asleep stupidly early, 8 p.m, slept for a few hours, woke up right as a button right after midnight, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? So, little package, went up, got a snack, and rolled onto the couch, Netflix, and DS9. Sat down and watched a couple of episodes of it last night. So, that's what I find for me. To go back into briefly an old Star Trek versus new Star Trek rant. The rewatchability of the old shows is absolutely fantastic. Like, I can't see, as much as I've enjoyed the new Star Trek shows, Discovery, Picard, and all that good stuff, I can't see the rewatchability of that happening quite as much as the original shows. But anyway, it is what it is. That is going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed my little chat about Star Trek the motion picture. Probably doesn't make any sense, and I'm pretty damn sure it wasn't in any way, start of the movie right through to the end. We jump back and forth quite a bit, but that is what this podcast is about, is having a chat about franchises that we love, and yes, just having a good time with it. So this podcast, before I go, isn't just going to be about Star Trek. It's mainly a Star Trek podcast. Of course, you've seen my artwork. I'm standing on the bridge of Enterprise D with a flipping command uniform on, going, hey! That's like the Star Trek equivalent of friggin' Fonzie. Eee! But I am a huge fan of science fiction in general. And right now, I'm watching that old 70s science fiction show from Jerry Anderson, UFO. Absolutely fantastic. So chances are, from time to time, we're going to break off, talk about old shows like that as well. So tell me, get in contact with the show. Hit that email, sceammeupbotty@gmail.com, and give me some suggestions for what you would like to see on See. You can't see a friggin' podcast. What the hell is this guy talking about? Hit me up on the email. Let me know what you'd like to hear on the show. And, hopefully at some point we can get a couple of other guest talkers on here to kind of help me out, because I'm still early days in the podcasting universe and very much in my own head when it comes to talking just to a mic. It's completely different than being a YouTuber, but we'll get there. So hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. Come back for the next one. It's going to be a good one. We're going to be talking about probably the best, not probably the best, like hands down, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek movie ever made, and we're going to be talking about that in the next episode. So yep, I'll talk to you then, guys. Have a great couple of days, and hit that follow button and rate and review. I would appreciate it. Talk to you then. This has been a production of Coins Edge Media. Check out my social media links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening.